So, hello everybody here. We are back for another Dark Side of the Ring, and boy, these Dark Side of the Ring episodes are getting, well, dark. I mean, the only bright spot that we've had was the New Jack episode, but God. So, this week's episode covered the murder of Dino Bravo. So, it starts off by talking about how he got shot 11 times. He got shot 11 times in the body and 7 times in the face. And that it was more than likely a mob hit. Well, no fucking shit. So they also interview Dino Bravo's daughter, and she talks about how Dino would take her backstage so that she could see all the wrestlers, and she was just like so like amazed by the world of wrestling, their costumes and their masks. And if like just by looking back at it, you can see that Dino was not only a huge star in Canada, where he was, wrestling, but he was big. He was huge and he was jacked. He was like really well built. I think like like it was the 70s and the early 80s, but boy, like this dude was like a shoulder above the rest. He was freaking huge. They also interview the Mountie because he knew Dino, and they would work together in Canada in the International Wrestling Organization. They would talk about, since Dino, that was his company, it was his baby. They would talk about how Dino would constantly book himself to be in the main event, and that some of the talent backstage weren't necessarily a huge fan of that, and that makes a lot of sense. It makes you seem like an egomaniacal person who will only put yourself over, and Mountie felt as though he was the biggest star to, get himself over and be in the main event, spot, but Dino was, well, he felt as though, that Mountie wasn't on his level. And all of this was happening during the golden era of WWE, the 80s, the era with Hogan, the Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior. And Vince knew, since he was taking over slowly in the United States, that if he was ever going to get that Canadian market, that Canadian money, he had to sign Dino Bravo. Because at the time, Dino Bravo was Canada's biggest stars. Like they had others like Andre the Giant and other like touring promotions, like touring attractions like Coco Beware and other big names, but in Canada the biggest name was Dino Bravo. Like nobody could touch Dino Bravo, and he had to get him if he was going to get that Canadian sweet Canadian Canuck money. And they talk about how they teased a dream match between Hogan and Dino Bravo, but ultimately they scrapped the match and pulled the plug on it altogether. And the reason why is because they thought that, and I assume that the match would have happened in Canada, because they say that they thought that Dino was going to get cheered more than Hogan would have. And if you, look back on, if you look back on similar stories, you know that WWE, they are not a fan of people getting over by themselves if WWE doesn't want that specific person to get over. So it's very believable that that could happen, and they've done that before, especially with Hulk Hogan. They've done it before. So once they officially pulled the plug on the match, Dino was not happy about it. He was not happy about it at all. So he tried to take the International Wrestling Association, his little company, International Wrestling, to the next level, to this point where they could potentially compete with the WWE, but there was no way that they could compete because WWE at the time was this breath of fresh air and this larger than life company. The showmanship that WWE had was unlike anything else that that any other company had at the time. So there was no way that international wrestling, which was only marketed in Canada, could take on the WWE. And slowly but surely, next thing you know, uh, top stars from international wrestling, one by one, they started leaving to WWE. They left the WWE because at the time they were getting contracts and they were getting money and they were getting like really good paydays out of this. And Dino, of course, he didn't like that because he needed that more than anything to survive, not only against Vince, but to keep international wrestling afloat. He needed them to he needed his top stars, but slowly, one by one, they were leaving. They were leaving over to WWE. And Dino, at this time, he had a family. He had a wife. He had a daughter, and he had to support his family. And he either had one of two choices. He can either go down with the ship and try to make it sail and try to make some money out of it, or ultimately sign with the WWE. And he eventually did because he needed the money to support his family. Um, they interviewed Jimmy Hart as well, since Jimmy was former manager of Dino Bravo. They paired the two up, and they talk about how now that Dino Bravo was in the WWE, that now he was making the big money. He was on the world's largest stage. He was in WWE, and nothing was bigger at the time than WWE. And so they talk about how Dino was making big money purchases, and his expenses were getting bigger. Former promoter that he used to work with, he got a house for him. They built, actually they built houses. They got money to build the houses so they could live right next to each other. He bought his 4-year old daughter a car. That's how much money Dino Bravo had. He had a lot of money and was making the big, big money with Vince McMahon. And slowly but surely, it would come at a price, as they wanted to change Dino's character. And Dino's character was, he was this big Canadian hero, because he actually was this big Canadian hero. So they changed him to a foreign, American hating villain. Like, all the great characters. Like Jinder Mahal, the Great Khali. Okay, I will give Vince some leeway because at the time it was sort of fresh and unique. But Vince, he never does change, does he? So they also talk about how Dino had limitations and that he couldn't necessarily, he had troubles getting over with the crowd because he had broken English. He was mainly, he's from Canada, he mainly spoke French and stuff like that, and he had trouble getting his words across sometimes. And the thing that Dino Bravo, they said that he struggled with and that he didn't like, is he didn't like putting over wrestlers that he had felt as though were not on his level. He didn't like losing. He didn't like losing unless, he felt as though the wrestler was on his level. And they talk about how you should not come into WWE with an ego. And as you can tell, Dino had a little bit of an ego. But then again, you can't blame him because he was sort of on top of his own. He was the top star in Canada. And now he would go from rarely losing in Canada to now losing all the time in the WWE. And he was also really, they say that, in the documentary, that he was getting up there in terms of age, from when he had signed with the WWE, uh, being in his late 30s and early 40s from his first run with the company. And yeah, that has something to do with it. Look, because in wrestling you only have a limited shelf life. I think everyone knows this. You have a limited shelf life. Stone Cold Steve Austin, he wrestled, and he wasn't even wrestling for that long. I think it might have been 5 or 6 years that he was wrestling. So careers aren't meant to last forever. And at the time, Dino's contract expired in 1992, and they told him that they would not be re signing him. And at this point, Dino had no sort of income whatsoever. The only thing that he knew and that he ever got money for was being a professional wrestler. He had no other real job skills, so he couldn't like find an office job. He was a professional wrestler, and once that's taken away from him, now he has no more money to live the lifestyle that he wants to live. So there was another way that Dino could get the money that he wanted, and that was working with the mob because he had some connections to the mob. And at first, when Dino started, he was mainly doing debt collecting, and he was an enforcer. I mean, look at the guy. Look how big the guy was. He was huge. He was jacked. He, of course, and also working in the wrestling business, that is gonna make you into an enforcer. Like you're picture perfect for the role. And they talk about how vicious Dino was, and how he could be, because one time Dino and the Mountie, they were like hanging out at a bar, and the Mountie had said something about there were like two main hockey teams in Canada, and the Mountie had talked trash on the other one. A fan had overheard, and he tried to kick the Mountie's ass, but Dino grabbed that guy who's trying to kick the Mountie's ass, and takes him outside, and he throws him into his Corvette like he's a rag doll, like he's made of nothing. That's how huge and powerful Dino Bravo was. So of course he was going to be made perfect for the role of enforcer and debt collector. And the Mountie then goes on to say how he gets a call from Dino, and that he wasn't particularly close with Dino. Like, they weren't close friends with each other, but, he was still somewhat of a friend. And so Mountie gets this call, and Dino says, hey, I need you to come see me right away. And Mountie couldn't come at the time he was calling, because he had some plans or something, and he's all like, okay, just come and see me as soon as you can. That's what Dino says. And so the next day, Mountie's on his way to see Dino, stops by a gas station, and he's told by someone that Dino had been shot 11 times in the body and 7 in the head. That is brutal. Dino's wife and his daughter, they were out at the ballet. I just have it written in my notes like that. They were at the ballet that night, and that's why they weren't in the house. And they come back, and they discover the body. And of course, they go to the next door neighbor, former promoter, and they say, Dino's dead, Dino's dead, he's been killed. He was sitting in a chair. And the things that they found at the crime scene, they found a pistol and a machine gun. And there were no signs of forced entry, and the door was unlocked. So it seemed as though he knew who his murderer was. I mean, he had a level of trust because the door was unlocked, no signs of forced entry, like, and he was sitting down as if he was being comfortable. So you put two and two together, it's only natural that he knew who his killer was. They think the police said that they think it was two people, one to hold the machine gun, one to hold the pistol. Since they found the two guns at the scene, and there were also people in the mafia that had moved into Dino's neighborhood because it was an upscale neighborhood where the rich would go, and that's a couple of mob guys moved over there. But what else is pretty weird is the fact that before Dino's death, there were two other different mafia style executions from members of the mob that happened in Dino's neighborhood. So again, the finger gets closer to be pointed at the mob. A few days later, the police ended up finding $55,000 in Dino's home, along with some contraband cigarettes, because Dino was selling contraband cigarettes. And at one point, there was a truck robbery, and no one knew what happened to some of the boxes. Some say it was worth $50,000 in illegal cigarettes. And they talk to Rick Martel, not in the pay-per-view, but like through some old how do you say, some old interview footage, because Dino would, for some reason, talk to Rick Martel about his life in the mafia. And Rick Martel, you know, says at the time, because everybody was buying illegal cigarettes, at a cheaper price, and that was, Dino's main gig. And so coke dealers, they weren't happy because, hey, everybody's buying contraband cigarettes, they're not buying coke. And so the big coke dealer talks to Dino and he says, hey, maybe once you're done selling cigarettes, you can come work for me, sell some coke. So Dino had a shipment and kept it in a warehouse. Shipment of illegal cigarettes worth $400,000. And Dino would keep it there for a couple days before moving it to where it needed to be. However, the police found the cigarettes, confiscated them away, and the mob lost tons and tons of money. Naturally, this is what people assume is the reason for Dino being killed, because he lost the mafia a lot of money. And again, he knew his attacker. You know why? Because I read mob books. I've read books on the mob, and they, even if you ever seen what was it called, Donnie Brasco, they said it's all Al Pacino says it's always your best friend that does it. In the mob, it's always your best friend that puts the bullet in you. And there are other accounts that, like, of mob guys murdering their best friends. So it doesn't surprise me that, the mafia is more than likely behind this. But, of course, we'll never know who Dino Bravo's killer really is. And the way that he was murdered was very excessive. I mean, how do you murder... It's like 11 bullets to the body and 7 to the head. It's very, like, gruesome. Like, it's very gruesome. Like, and excessive. Like, just give him a couple... Never mind. I don't want to talk about how you should kill someone. But the sad thing is, yeah, no one will ever know. I mean, they talked. Uh, it was either Dino's wife or Dino's daughter that said maybe it's better that we didn't know because our hate would be concentrated on that one person, and we don't want, like, we don't want to get down on it and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll never know who killed Dino Bravo. Yeah, that's what happens when you get involved in the mob. Eventually, you're either gonna go to prison or you're gonna die. No, very few people have gone on to live a good life after the mob. So you're either gonna get killed or you're gonna go to jail forever. But yeah, no, I thought the episode was really good. I thought it was really good. They've been doing some good work with these dark side of the rings. I just wish they weren't so damn depressing because like you hear about like now he's like now his wife has no like wife's a widow. His daughter doesn't have a dad. Like like it's just depressing is all. Um, yeah, this all this. Hopefully, I don't know what the next episode is, but hopefully it's another one that will you know bring it up a little bit because these last two ones have been a little bit depressing, and I need a little bit of a detox. So do me a favor, let me know what you guys think about this episode, what you thought about it, I was gonna say Gino Hernandez, different one. What your Dino Bravo conspiracy theories are, who you think killed Dino Bravo. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Make sure you hit that like, share, and subscribe button. I've been Samuel V, aka the Excellent Reviewer, and I'll see you all as soon as I can. Goodbye and good night.